Okay. So here are the first questions. And again, we mentioned this last time when we were talking about cellular respiration. These are questions that I wrote to get you to think about these materials in, I think, the best way possible. But before we address these questions, I want to ask you something, and hopefully to connect photosynthesis back with cellular respiration so that you understand both more clearly. How do we make the bulk of the ATP during cellular respiration? How do we actually do it? How do we make the bulk of the ATP during cellular respiration? During which process? What is the mechanism? However you want to address that.
The electron transfer.
The electron transfer chain, also known as, Kyle? Oxyphos. Oxidative phosphorylation. And what is oxidation? It is loss, right? So that's where this name oxyphos comes from. Oxidative phosphorylation. As electrons are lost, we are phosphorylating ADP to make ATP. Now what's the connection? How do we connect those two? How does losing electrons or the electrons transferring actually equate to ATP? Katie.
Because the energy lost is used to, or no, wait, the electrons lost are used to use energy to make ATP.
Yes, but there, what happens in between the two? The active transport of what?
Hydrogen ions.
Hydrogen ions, right? As electrons transfer and they drop in energy level, that energy difference is used to fuel the pumping of hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient. Does that make sense? Sorry, I was going to say something and then I had to abort. Okay, so how do you think the bulk of the ATP is going to be made during photosynthesis?
Same thing.
Same thing, an electron transport chain where electrons drop in energy level, and as they do, that difference in energy can be used to fuel what?
Photosynthesis.
Yes, but it can be used to fuel what? What's the intermediate? Pumping hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient. Right? It's not one word.
Well, the way you were like phrasing that is not making me just want to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm a complex person. And very rarely am I going to give you a blank that's a one-word blank. I mean, it's only going to be a single blank because I'm not the kind of person that gives you like three, if it's 3 words, gives you 3 separate blanks to clue you in that it's actually 3 words. No, I just give you one and you got to know it's 3 words. I'm a complex person.
You expect
As
a
a
lot.
long blank.
Oh, you know what? You know what I really like to do? If I write fill in the blank questions, which I don't ever write, it's terrible, is to do like just 3 letters worth of a blank, so it's a tiny little blank.
Why?
Because.
That's so annoying.
Because then it takes up less space and I can fit more questions on a single page.
Well, then we have to like write it in small.
Well, you write it sideways.
That's so annoying.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's.
Why you don't write
Hey.
it?
And let's say you can just try and fit it into space, and then you don't know what we're saying, so you can't mark it right or wrong, then you have to make the space.
Oh, if I can't read it, it's wrong.
Well, then you should make the space.
Okay. All right. So here are the first 4 questions. What happens during photosynthesis? Although you can already anticipate. What happens during photosynthesis? You can already anticipate. We've got some kind of electron transport chain. You can also anticipate that we're going to do something with carbon. During photosynthesis, what do we do with carbon? Do we oxidize it or do we reduce it during photosynthesis?
We reduce.
We reduce carbon. Nicely done. So during photosynthesis, we reduce carbon, and it's not a full reduction, because what does reduction mean? Gain. And carbon isn't really gaining electrons, it's just going to spend more time with the electrons that it has.
So cute.
I know, it's adorable. All right, so his first question, what happens during photosynthesis? I'm glad you asked.
Wait, so this is about photosynthesis?
This is about photosynthesis. You bet it is.
Oh, this is my camp notes.
Yeah. No.
Best notes of the year, I said.
Okay, so here's the overall reaction of photosynthesis. And if you are observant, you'll notice that this happens to basically be the reverse of the reaction that summarizes cellular respiration. Okay? In cellular respiration, we take something like this, like glucose or some other 6-carbon sugar, and we use oxygen, and we produce carbon dioxide and water. Okay? And photosynthesis, it's basically the reverse. And just like in cellular respiration, where we present this reaction never takes place inside of a plant. This reaction is a summary of several different reactions that are taking place. This reaction never actually happens. Okay, it's a summary. It's a, I don't know how to explain it other than that it's a summary.
Of like everything that's happening inside and out of there during for photosynthesis.
Yes. Yep.
Is the arrow what happens inside?
The arrow?
Yeah.
Oh, you'll see. We'll talk about this. Okay, and then we know carbon gets reduced. We know that because that's how it works. In photosynthesis, we reduce carbon. In cellular respiration, we oxidize carbon. And so the actual individual carbon atoms are not getting electrons. The molecules that the carbons are part of, bless you, you're welcome, are getting electrons. And here's basically this summary of what's happening with carbon. So we're taking carbon dioxide, we're adding more hydrogens, and we're adding some electrons, and we're going to generate these carbohydrates, CH2O. CH2O. Wow. That was.
Did you see that?
I did see that.
That was kind of cool.
Okay. Now somebody tell me what's required for photosynthesis. What do we need? If you were a plant and you really wanted to be exceptional at photosynthesis, what would you need? Sunlight. Beautiful. You absolutely need sunlight. What else do you need?
Water.
You do need water, right? We have right here that we are requiring more water than we're making. You see this? We're requiring 12 while making 6. True or false? 12 is greater than 6. That is true. So we need water. If you want to be exceptional at photosynthesis, you need water. And that makes sense because you're like, well, plants need water. And then what else do we need?
Nice. Carbon dioxide.
We need carbon dioxide. Okay? Right? Because that's what you use to build sugars out of.
We need
The photosynthesis is reducing carbon. You need a carbon source. Now, luckily for plants, we give them plenty of carbon dioxide. Yeah, you go breathe on a plant and you just know it's like somebody giving you a thing of oxygen at a high elevation, you know? Yeah.
It's kind of weird. But is photosynthesis happening throughout the entire plant?
No, typically not. Mostly just in the leaves.
Really?
Yeah, some of it can happen in the stems, but in a lot of the plants that you have, they have a really hard outer layer called the bark that prohibits photosynthesis from happening in the stems.
So it's all
Mostly just in the
what about
leaves.
petals? No, right?
No, definitely not in flower petals. Yeah, definitely not. Okay, so we have 2 parts of photosynthesis. We have what are called the light-dependent reactions. What does it mean to depend on light?
You need it.
You need it, right? It's like, you all are children, so you know about dependence, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
Plenty.
Because you have plenty of friends that depend on you for their emotional well-being, right? You have plenty of people you depend on for your emotional and physical well-being. Wow, so Kyle depends on you and you depend on Kyle. That's a great friendship. Yeah. That's give and take. That's give and take. Although Rick seems like a taker.
What? I'm a giver. I'm such a giver.
And so, the light-dependent reactions are all about making ATP. The light-dependent reactions are all about making ATP. What are the light-dependent reactions all about, Rick?
They're all about making ATP.
They're all about making ATP. And we know from cellular respiration, if you're going to make ATP, you better be pumping something against its concentration gradient. And what are we pumping?
Hydrogen.
We're pumping hydrogen ions. And we know from cellular respiration, if you're going to pump hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient, you better be transferring electrons. I'm not kidding you.
I'm sorry.
I accept your apology.
Myself.
I accept your apology. Okay? So the light-dependent reaction is all about making ATP. The light-independent reactions, all about reducing carbon. The light-dependent reactions, what are they all about? Making ATP. The light-independent reactions, what are they all about? Reducing carbon.
He literally just said
So
it.
bad at this.
Okay, can we see this one more time?
Yes, let's wait, everybody. Shh. The light-dependent reactions, what are they all about? Making ATP. The light-independent reactions, what are they all about? Reducing carbon. Oh, that's so wonderful. And you know, if you're going to reduce carbon and reduction is a gain of electrons, you better have electrons to do that reduction, right?
When there's oil, there has to be.
Yeah, do you agree?
Yeah.
How can you reduce something without electrons? If reduction is gain of electrons, you better get some electrons, right?
Where there's rig, there's oil.
Where there's rig, there's oil. I like that. Where there's rig, there's oil. Sorry that I keep getting in your way.
It happens.
Does that make sense? So there's one thing that more clearly attaches these two together than anything else, and that is this. The NADP plus, which after it's reduced becomes NADPH and has the electrons that we need to fix carbon. Okay? Yes. You weren't talking to me though.
Oh, I was hoping.
I like to hijack conversations because it's fun. You know what's a lot of fun to do it is to do it at airports when people are on the phone with somebody. Oh yeah, because people are pretty stressed out at the airport already.
You're terrible.
Yeah,
No, we went to the football game and Engel had to ref the game, right? And then he's like, yeah, the guy from the team was like, yeah, we would get one of the high school kids, but we don't have a high school team here, so we don't really know about football. He's like, yeah, I don't know about football either. And they just walked away. The guy thought he was serious.
Although after I ref that game, he probably was like, yeah, he really doesn't know anything. All right,
Well, you're helping them out.
so yeah, can we go back? Sure.
It was so funny. The guy was fishing.
Can we go forward again?
And ATP fixing it.
You don't have to copy it.
Sis, I need to do it again because I don't remember anything. I know.
Light
Get
dependent.
up.
Okay,
Light
so-
reduce carbon.
This diagram is similar to the one I showed you last time. The difference is this is exploring the specific aspects of photosynthesis. So we've got the light-dependent reactions, and what are the light-dependent reactions all about? Making ATP. Look at this. We're making ATP. And what are the light-independent reactions all about? Reducing carbon, taking carbon dioxide and reducing it into a carbohydrate. Okay? And so the nice thing about this diagram is it really shows you what are all the things necessary to carry out those two main goals. So the main goal here is to make ATP. The main goal here is to reduce carbon. But in order to reduce carbon, what do we need?
ATP.
We need ATP and we also need
Electrons.
electrons, right? The reducing agent. And so here are the electrons on this molecule, and here's the ATP, the energy necessary to carry out those reactions. And what do we need to make ATP? We need sunlight and we need water.
Yep.
Sunlight and we need water. That's how we make ATP. Now the beauty is as a plant makes ATP, it also produces oxygen, which is wonderful for both the plant and for us. Plant needs oxygen, we need oxygen. Why does a plant need oxygen?
So it can make
It can make more oxygen.
It does.
for itself.
Why do it does need it for itself? Yes, to live, but why?
To put it in like the other, like the
To provide it to the-
and
Why do we need oxygen?
Breathe. Plants don't
Well, but yes, to breathe, but what do we use it for? Cellular respiration. The red blood cells just carry it around to cells, but we need oxygen for what? Cellular respiration. Why do plants need oxygen? Cellular respiration. Remember that question last time? When we're like, step one, what is this, right? To get from carbon dioxide to sugar, what's that step? To get from carbon dioxide to sugar. From carbon dioxide to sugar. It's photosynthesis, right? And we are reducing carbon. This is going to be fun, I know it. And then to get from sugar back to carbon dioxide, what is that? To get from sugar back to carbon dioxide, cellular respiration, and we're oxidizing carbon, right? And then that question asked you, what is an organism that can do both? And it's a plant. And what that means is a plant can do both, a plant has to do both. Because it has its own energetic needs. Is that another one, or did you break it?
It broke.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't break. You broke it.
That could be the case.
That could be the case. Yeah. It's okay.
It does not change my need for the petrochem.
It sure doesn't. Okay? Does that make sense? What are the light-dependent reactions all about? Making ATP. And what do you need to make ATP?
Sunlight and water.
Sunlight and water. Okay, what are the light-independent reactions all about? Reducing carbon. And what do you need to reduce carbon?
Carbon dioxide.
You need carbon dioxide, you need ATP, and you need electrons from here. Okay? We have a couple more questions we're going to deal with, and then we're going to talk about specific problems. You'll love it.
Here. I have it all. Yeah,
Okay.
I got it all.
How is water used during photosynthesis? How is water used? Because we know we need water to make ATP, yes? Here's what water is doing. Water is our source of electrons. Water is our source of electrons. And I say our like we're plants. I don't know if you know this or not, but we are not plants. And we do not photosynthesize. I know.
Really?
I wish.
Mind blowing.
I wish.
But you just like lay out.
Do you wish?
Yes.
Plant life seems to be pretty boring.
You just can't even move.
I was also pretty
Animals
boring.
can just like use. I would
Do you want-
never get plants.
Girls.
Unless I was a tree.
Well, you wouldn't know you were a plant.
I can see, but
Yeah, I don't think plants are self-aware. So if you were a plant, yeah, I think you're right, Rick, that you wouldn't know you
oh
were
my
a plant.
god, dude, trees
Okay.
are all the trees.
Okay. So here's what happens to water in the light dependent reactions of photosynthesis. We take some water molecules and we split them into oxygen gas. That's wonderful. Plant needs it, we need it. And some hydrogen ions and some electrons. And what are those electrons going to be used for, Kyle? What are we going to use the electrons for? Yeah, ultimately reducing carbon, but what is your favorite part of cellular respiration? Yes, absolutely. And so we're going to use these electrons for the electron transport chain. So we can do oxidative phosphorylation. Hey, welcome.
The door caught me, otherwise
No, she gave you
I
away.
would have actually almost injured you. She gave me, you did.
Yeah. It helps that they don't really pay attention to me, so they're always looking for something else. And so
I resonate.
I got you so distracted.
I resonate. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
that's fine.
Can I borrow you for like 10 seconds?
Absolutely. You can borrow me for 20 minutes.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, we don't care.
Okay, I just start counting down.
What, sorry.
Oh man. Oh man.
Split down, just about here, and then like down the middle, and then two little Dutch braids, and then like.
What are you gonna write,
Oh,
Karen?
did you write anything?
No, you should write something. Since you're disappointed with mine.
When I don't even know the difference.
Just raise the braces.
Hair time.
You think he's telling you what house he's in?
I know, right? It's a little touch. Wait, girl, sis, that does not really.
I literally just wait. Are they gonna do
We're gonna interrogate him.
That would be the signals for every interval.
Wait, no, I don't like. What are those either like
Oh, it says right here.
My hair was in the middle part.
Now I just realizing I guess I'm going to take you too long. Yes.
Yes, the other day I must have told Martin she should.
Okay. This is like your day of the week.
Are you Cincinnati now?
Here's Cincinnati now.
My
Do you know
Cincinnati.
your house?
Huh?
Do you know your house?
Do I know my house? I might.
Maybe Cincinnati.
Okay.
You're red and red.
Yep. Okay.
You are Cincinnati?
Yeah.
You said.
I'm not gonna tell you.
When can you tell us?
I don't think I can ever tell you, but
What do you mean? Figure it out.
eventually, yes, eventually you'll know. And probably pretty soon. Okay, so water gives us our electrons for the electron transport chain so that we can do oxidative phosphorylation, oxyphos. Water also gives us the hydrogen ions. And what do we do with hydrogen ions during oxyphos? We pump them. And where do we pump them? Against their concentration gradient. And in the mitochondrion, we pump them into the space in between two membranes, right? In the chloroplast, we pump them into some space within some of these chloroplast membranes as well.
So
And
it
they-
only happens in chloroplast.
Correct, photosynthesis in plants. Although there are bacteria that do photosynthesis, they don't have organelles, right? Because membrane-bound organelles are eukaryotic features. It's in the plasma membrane. So the machinery for photosynthesis in the plasma membrane of bacteria. It is cool.
Are we gonna learn like what's inside of the chloroplast?
Chlorophyll.
Yeah, I mean, not in a lot of detail because you don't need to know that for the AP exam. So the last thing that water provides is it provides oxygen, right? As we split a water molecule, we generate oxygen. Okay? And that plant needs oxygen to carry out cellular respiration. We need oxygen to carry out cellular respiration. It's true. We totally need it.
It's a beautiful cycle.
We totally need it. It is a beautiful cycle. It's a beautiful thing that plants make more sugar than they need, and they make more oxygen than they need.
Oh, nice of them.
Because we need their sugar, and we need their oxygen, and they make more than they need. They're givers. They're givers, like Kyle, in Kyle and Rick's relationship. They're
I
givers.
mean, we're the takers. 'Cause
We are the takers, like Rick in Kyle and Rick's relationship. Or you could say like me in Rick and I's relationship. I'm the taker. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am living vicariously through Rick. You know, because I never had the opportunity to play college football, but Rick does. Because I was undersized and untalented. Bam! Oh man, mostly undersized. I'm incredibly talented, you know, undersized. All right.
Oh, I roasted
Okay,
him up.
we don't need this. Ignore this.
Don't worry.
Ignore this. Okay.
I need to.
I was like, AJ, just shut up.
All right. Couple more questions, and then we're gonna go over example AP exam questions. All right. You didn't get the last note?
What time are we leaving? 9:30?
9:30, and somebody's supposed to come get us.
What did you just say?
Is Mrs. Cato coming on the trip with us?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Are we just walking?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's.
At her pace, so for us it'll be like a 20-minute walk.
I don't think I can walk at her pace. I'll take up the rear and make sure there aren't any stragglers. You know?
How about you drive?
Oh my gosh, I should totally drive.
Take us. Take us.
All right. Where does photosynthesis take place? Now, we just mentioned this. Somebody tell me, in our bacteria that undergo photosynthesis, where does it take place? Isa. In the plasma membrane. So in cyanobacteria, look at this. You nailed it. In cyanobacteria, photosynthesis takes place in the plasma membrane. And then the light independent reactions, some of those take place just in the cytosol, that fluid of the cell. But in eukaryotes, photosynthesis always happens in the chloroplast. Always happens in the chloroplast. Okay? So in eukaryotes, photosynthesis always happens in the chloroplast. 3 membrane structures. Wow, that's really...
That's so annoying.
I don't know what that means. And then I didn't close my parenthesis.
It's like the
Wow.
Are we gonna have a break?
That's really bad. Are we gonna have a break? It's like 8, it's 8:28.
I know, but what do we do? I'm gonna get a break.
So for the first one, do you mean like prokaryote or just bacteria?
For all prokaryotes that are photosynthetic. Which the only prokaryotes that are photosynthetic are cyanobacteria.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Okay, and so
Not change the
I
size.
confused.
I'm not changing the slide, relax.
I drilled it.
So the light dependent reactions, and what are these all about again? Making ATP. These happen in what we call the thylakoid membrane. That is the innermost membrane inside of a chloroplast. And so the mitochondria have two membranes, right? Do you remember that? Mitochondria have two membranes, inner and outer. Yes?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. No, don't say no. This is not the right answer. Chloroplasts have three membranes. They have an inner, an outer, and thylakoid membranes. And the thylakoid membranes, this is where all the machinery are located for the light-dependent reactions, which are all about? What are the light-dependent reactions all about? Making ATP. Now, the light-independent reactions, these happen in the fluid inside of the chloroplast. It's called the stroma, is that fluid.
Is there another word like that? Stroma?
Stroma, are you thinking like the stoma, which are the openings? Well, stomata is plural, the openings in plants.
That, yeah.
Yeah. Stoma is singular, stomata, plural. It's like stigma is singular, stigmata is plural.
Armada.
Armada. Although
I don't know.
armada, the singular is not.
It just sounded the same.
Yeah. What's another good example of that?
Walrus.
Chiasma, chiasmata. Oh, you walrus. Yeah. Well, I mean, the walruses, their population numbers are dwindling, so eventually there will only be one walrus, you know? You won't have to worry about what the plural of walrus is. Moose. Yeah, it should. Yeah, I think it should be meese, like goose and geese. Moose and meese. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I went to the what do you call it? The science fair yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, it was awesome. It was awesome. I did help judge it, and there were some people that did some work on mice. They got them as pups and then fed them different diets. Yeah, that's what you call the baby mice. And then one of them, right after they ended their trial, the mouse died. I don't know why I stuttered so much there. And so they didn't want to talk about it. So I was looking. They had the mice in a cage, and I only saw two of them. And I was like, "Are all three mice in there?" And they were like, "Well, actually, we had a casualty." And I was like, "When did it happen?" Yeah. And I was like, "Did it happen during your test?" And they're like, "No. It happened afterwards." They said it, but it was the mouse that we fed that got the worst diet, though.
Oh, poor guy.
I know.
No, that's a
So here's the structure of a chloroplast. Okay, so like mitochondria, chloroplasts have an outer and inner membrane. You see that?
Yeah.
Outer membrane, inner membrane. But then in addition, chloroplasts have these thylakoid membranes. And look at how much membrane there is, how much surface area.
That's a lot.
Which is suggestive that whatever's packed into that membrane is really important, right?
Yeah.
If you've got a lot of surface area, it suggests that whatever's packed into that membrane, it's really important. And what's in this membrane again? Now the stroma is the fluid around it. What's in these membranes?
Like,
The light-dependent reactions happen in these membranes, which means what's in these membranes? The machinery necessary to carry out the light-dependent reactions. And we know that the light-dependent reactions are all about making ATP. And we know that if you're going to make ATP, what do you need to do? Kyle? What do we need to do to make ATP?
Electron transport.
Yes. And so we need machinery. We need machinery. We need machinery that is going to strip electrons away from water. We need machinery that are going to transfer electrons. We need machinery that are going to pump hydrogen ions against their concentration gradient. And we know we need a machine that will allow that boulder to tumble down the hill, right? Do you remember this analogy I gave you yesterday that the hydrogen ions that we pumped against their concentration gradient? There are boulders sitting on top of a hill, right? Or on top of a cliff. And there's only one way that boulder can come down, and it's to move through a machine. And what is that machine called?
Gravity. Oh, no. The potassium.
ATP synthase. Trinity, nicely done. Nicely done. ATP synthase. And so that's the only place hydrogen ions can move back down their concentration gradient. And as they do, they make ATP. All right? Any questions? Okay. No questions?
No, sir.
All righty. I've got a few questions I want you to work on, and
Yes, sir. Read
Yeah.
on a square.
okay. Let's actually
You're a great
let's do this.
You should go on American Idol.
Yeah.